Prostitution, Colorism, and Lies. This is the history of telenovelas. Welcome to Deep Dives with me, your host, Esther. What is it about telenovelas that has a grip on the Latin community? You're probably wondering, really? Prostitution, colorism, and lies? Yeah, it's a thing. If you didn't know, telenovelas came from radionovelas. Back in the 1930s, they were popularized because factory owners put on radionovelas so that their employees could be entertained and so that they could come back to their job the next day to hear the rest of the radionovela. Now, the target demographic for this was 1950s housewives, but factory owners found it as a really useful tool to get their employees to come back to work, which is so sad. I can't even imagine what working conditions were like back then, but at least it was something that the workers looked forward to so that they would listen to the radionovela as they worked, and then they would stop whenever there was like a twist or turn, and then they would get back to work, which is so interesting that that's why radionovelas became a thing. Don't you just love history? It's so interesting. So the first telenovela ever to be televised was in 1950, and it was called Su Vida Me Pertenece. I think in Brazilian it's Sua Vida Me Pertenece. Then in 1952, it was Cuba's turn when they released Senderos de Amor. And in that same year, Mexico released their first soap opera called Angeles de la Calle. Now, the subject matter was always and continues to be very scandalous. Incest, love, and cheating and deceit. Sounds like my TikTok. So this was really outrageous for the time. Then in 1970, the Cinderella trope became extremely popular for that decade. So what's the Cinderella trope? It's the poor girl that meets the wealthy guy, they end up falling in love, and they get married. Like Cinderella, you know? You know when you have a little hair on your face and you can't see it, but you can feel it? So the first soap opera to really popularize the Cinderella trope was Los Ricos También Lloran. It was created by Inés Rodena and written by Maria Saratini, and it starred Veronica Castro. She is fabulous, and we will touch on her later on because she was one of the biggest soap opera actresses in the 70s and the 80s, and her love interest in the soap opera was Rogelio Guerra. It was the first telenovela to become famous worldwide, and it was also the first Western TV show that was presented on Russian television. The cast became so famous there that they were even invited to go for the presidential elections. It made Veronica Castro super famous, like ultra, uber famous. Not only was she a good actress, but she is beautiful, and she still continues to be this amazingly gorgeous woman. Los Pobres También Lloran became so famous that people in Mexico had to open up more production companies in order to satisfy the need, the demand for telenovelas. Now, this trope was so famous that a Peruvian... There we go. Got it. Because this trope was so famous, there was a Peruvian novela called Simplemente Maria, and that blew up too. And in that soap opera, she was a maid who wanted a better life, so she became a seamstress and went to night school. The soap opera became so popular in Peru that people actually started going to night school and wanting to become seamstresses and moving to the big city, because in the soap opera, she moves from a rural area to the big city, which is incredible, the influence that one single novela had on all of Peru. Esclava Isaura also used that same trope with huge success. This opened way to the golden age of telenovelas. So the 80s and the 90s was the golden age. It was a time where all of these actors were becoming celebrities and becoming worldwide celebrities. I just hope Veronica Castro was making bank, because I would cry if she was. Especially Brazil. They had a handle on it. Brazilians knew what they were doing. They had all the drama. Now, some of the most popular soap operas of the 80s were Mexican ones. I'm going to name a couple, not all of them. Cuna de Lobos. This, by far, has one of the most famous villains in all of telenovela history. And then another one was Quinceañera, which was actually one of the first young or teenage soap operas to ever come out. Teresa was also a very popular soap opera of the 80s. Starring Salma Hayek. Teresa from the 80s was actually a remake of Teresa from the 60s. And then it was remade again in the 2010s, which I think has been said to be even more popular than the two originals. And this gave us the first collaboration between Angelique Boyer and Sebastián Rulli, who are a couple now, and they're, dream couple of Mexican telenovela history, because they seem to have a healthy relationship, but there's so much drama in the way that their relationship started. I need to do a whole deep dive on just the drama between actors and stuff that happened on set, because that's a whole different topic. Another very famous 1980s soap opera was El Derecho de Nacer, and that was, again, Veronica Castro. Veronica was everywhere, and she was loved. People loved Veronica Castro. She also had a beautiful voice. She grew up extremely poor. Her dad abandoned her and her siblings, her 4 siblings, and her mom didn't have a great job, so she struggled a lot. But Veronica Castro took charge. She was the oldest of her siblings. I can relate to that because my sister really helped my mom when my dad abandoned us, and my sister did what Veronica Castro did. She clothed her siblings, she fed them, she took care of them. So she started a relationship with Manuel Valdez. She was 18 when she met him, and he was 39. A year later, they were in a production together, and they both said that it was love at first sight. But they keep their relationship a secret. And this is when she finds out that not only did he have another wife, he was married, and this wife and him had kids, but he had also fathered 12 other children with 8 other women. But the worst part is that Veronica Castro was already pregnant when she found out all this information about him having the wife and the other kids, 12 other kids with 8 different women. Veronica decides to have the baby by herself, and this baby is Cristian Castro. And Cristian Castro became one of the biggest singers of the 1990s. What a beautiful man, and what a beautiful voice. He looks just like his mom. Thank God. She did not need that man. La Usurpadora with Gabriela Spanik was definitely one of the most famous. She played twins, an evil twin and a good twin. You just buy it. You believe everything she says. She is such a great actress. You hate the bad one, but you love the good one because she's so good and she's so kind and so sweet. Another huge soap opera from the 90s, and one of my personal favorites, is Esmeralda. Esmeralda, I need to try not to say it the Nica way. Leticia Calderon played Esmeralda, and this soap opera reached a huge level of fame, especially in Eastern Europe. She's one of the celebrities that went over to Eastern Europe to promote the novela, and people were fainting when they saw her. Then we have Marimar and Maria la del Barrio, but all those soap operas all had the same lead character, which was Thalia. Thalia was one of the biggest actresses in the 1990s in Mexico, and not only was she a great actress, but she was actually a wonderful singer and a beautiful performer. Like on stage, you just could not take your eyes off of this woman. Maria la del Barrio also was one of those soap operas that gave us the iconic Itati Cantoral, which gave us this iconic scene. That is the most dramatic thing ever, but it's so good. Come on. La Usurpadora. Fernando Colunga played Maria la del Barrio's love interest, but they broke up afterwards. And Fernando Colunga was, again, an insanely popular 90s novela actor. All right, now some of the most popular telenovelas from the early 2000s. The early 2000s brought us the teen genre. Teenagers in the 90s were all about their novelas, so they needed to target that demographic. A really popular soap opera from the early 2000s, which was literally the year 2000, was A Mil por Hora, which starred Anaí and Cuño Becker. Cuño Becker, even now, he is so good looking. He's so handsome. But in A Mil por Hora, he just had this masculine protector thing, and he just had the most beautiful hair, and he was so good looking, and his body was perfect. Oh my God, he was just so dreamy. He was like the epitome of the teenage quintessential, handsome, protective, good guy. At this point, Anaí had already had a full career. She started acting when she was 2 years old. And she started singing and had a prolific singing career. And even into her teenage years, she was a wonderful singer. And she was given lead roles in really big telenovelas. Trigger warning for this. You can skip to this once we're done talking about it. In the 90s, skinny was the standard for beauty. And we could see that with Kate Moss, but we see that in the telenovela industry in Mexico, because all of these beautiful actresses didn't have an ounce of fat on their bodies. And in 2000, when they approach Anaí and say, hey, we want to give you this role, but you know that lead actresses in telenovelas, they have to be skinny. So they look at this teenage girl who's 14 going on 15 and is already skinny, and they tell her, if you want to get the role, you have to lose weight. And this began her extremely difficult time in her life, where she was anorexic and I think bulimic. In preparation for the soap opera, she lost an insane amount of weight. And the worst part is that this all happened publicly. The press were relentless in judging her for her weight, and also relentless when they would interview her outside of the studio and ask her like, oh, how's your anorexia? Are you anorexic? Who is being told by a studio that the only way you're going to keep working with us is if you lose weight. Anaí was actually interviewed in one of her friend's podcasts, and that is a wonderful interview. I definitely recommend you listen to it because she really goes into depth about what her experience was like during that time, and it was pretty bad. And that's what I think is the most tragic part, is that she was offered her biggest lead role up until that point, but she couldn't enjoy it because it was all masked with the "you're not skinny enough." I just think it's so tragic to put a teenager in that situation. Luckily, after the soap opera ended, her family put her into rehab. She came back to work 2 years later. And then this is when she was offered a role in Clase 406. But Clase 400 walked so that Rebelde could run. The Mexican Rebelde came is an adaptation from the Argentinian one. So Rebelde gave way to the band Rebelde, or RBD. And the man was like, oh my God, I gotta start a band with them. This is how we're gonna make money off of it. Singing their heads off at huge concerts and huge venues. And the next day they would fly back to Mexico to film. And this led to exhaustion. It also led to a lot of the band members being really unhappy with Televisa because they signed a contract that basically said your likeness is the character and the character is the singer in the band. So essentially every time they were on stage, they stayed in character as the character of the soap opera. This allowed Televisa to not have to pay them fairly. So while they were touring the world, selling out concerts, selling out venues, selling out tours. This is a huge point of contention. Later on, Poncho said that he was miserable. He hated it. Like, Rebelde Core was a huge thing. Everybody was dressing up like that. They raised a whole generation, like including me. I watched Rebelde. I would get home from school and I would look forward to watching Rebelde because I loved it that much. And I loved Anaí. I loved all the characters, except Maite Perroni. I don't know why. I couldn't get behind her character. I felt like she was such una víctima, you know? Everything was like, oh, poor me, and I'm gonna sacrifice myself for everybody else. My ultimate, most favorite telenovela of all time is Rubí, which premiered in 2004. Now, the casting for this novela was contentious. Every single actress wanted the role of Rubí, but the role went to Bárbara Mori, and I think she is just too perfect for that role. I'm not even joking. It's like she was born to play that specific role. She is just vindictive but beautiful, callous but charismatic. You just can't take your eyes off of her, and she deserves every single accolade that she received. Also, Teresa. Teresa is the remake from the 1960 and the 1980s Salma Hayek version. It catapulted Angelique Boyer into stardom. She got the best roles after that. I think she's definitely unequivocally one of the best Mexican actresses. She did date El Güero Castro, which there's a whole lot of drama to uncover there. I need to do a whole deep dive on just the drama in the industry. I do touch on some of it here, but now that I'm talking about it, I'm like, yeah, that's a lot. Like, I need to cover all those topics. People think that she got ahead because she dated one of the biggest producers who got her the role of Teresa. 2013 brought us Lo que la vida me robó. But this catapulted both of them into the stratosphere of Mexican fame. If you're like me, you're probably wondering, but what is the most successful telenovela of all time? Well, that is Yo Soy Betty La Fea, and that was a Colombian production. In 2010, Yo Soy Betty La Fea was granted the Guinness World Record as the most successful soap opera of all time. It was seen in 180 countries. It was remade 30 times. Salma Hayek bought the rights to it and made the American version, which starred America Ferrer. The 2020s gave us more complex and diverse themes, and this was what gave way to the narco novela. Narco novelas are so popular now, and it's uncovering a whole different issue that has never been touched before. If you have noticed by all the pictures, a lot of these actors are European looking. In the 80s and the 90s, especially the 90s, whenever you saw a lead, they were always more European looking. And when you saw a maid or a worker or someone that was delivering something or just appeared on screen for a little bit because they were somebody that, you know, a chauffeur or something, they were always more indigenous or brown. And this is obviously colorist. White skin represented wealth. It meant that you didn't have to work. Yes, colorism definitely existed and still exists, although now you are more likely to see somebody that's more indigenous looking or darker skin. There's not enough representation, even in the Latin community, within the telenovela industry. There still isn't enough representation. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about the prostitution. Again, legend has it that there exists a catalog, essentially a list of actors and actresses, both male and female, that Televisa used to give schmexual favors to politicians, athletes, and businessmen. There have been whistleblowers like Kate del Castillo, who has said in interviews that when she was in her first soap opera ever, she was called by a female executive from Televisa and she was told, hey, you're invited to this party. And she said, oh, great, my boyfriend and I will come. And then she's like, no, you can't bring him. It's just an invitation for you. And she's like, oh, well then, no, that's okay. Because she didn't like the sound of that. And this executive said, we're not asking you, we're telling you. She declined. And after that, Televisa punished her by never giving her a lead role again. This list also served as a way for politicians to basically shop for a celebrity wife. A lot of these politicians were told, for your campaign and just for the appearance of it, it's better if you get with a woman that's already famous, who is already liked by the Mexican fan base of telenovelas. Now in the 1980s, Adela Noriega was popping. She was everywhere. She was in all the soap operas. She was making tons of money. In 1988, she disappeared. She had an amazing career going. Adela Noriega was apparently on this list. So this rumor starts flying around that Adela Noriega, who was 19 at the time, was having an affair with 40-year-old President Carlos Salinas. Apparently, Carlos Salinas saw her on the catalog, and he calls up the president of Televisa, and he's like, hey, you need to introduce me to this girl right now. Like, I want her. He was obsessed. Adela is dating Luis Miguel at the time, or apparently trying to. He was obsessed with her. He wanted to be with her, but she was falling in love with the 40-year-old Mexican president. This is when Carlos Salinas allegedly sends people to beat up Luis Miguel as a warning. You stay away from Adela. She's mine. And he backs up. He's like, okay, cool. She's all yours. Carlos Salinas is married. They have an affair and she gets pregnant. This is why in 1988, she disappears. She does nothing. She disappears. She goes to the United States and she comes back 4 years later with a baby, with a child, with an infant, with the 4-year-old kid. What's her explanation is that she has family friends who died and they left behind this child, and so she decided to raise him like it was her own son. All the while, the rumor was that the president's wife was dying of jealousy. She went to the hospital when Adela Noriega was giving birth and she slapped her. She physically assaulted her, and this was what made Adela Noriega want to go live in the U.S. So the president sends her to live in the U.S. He sets her up and they have this kid, this secret love child. After 4 years, she starts working for Telemundo, which is Televisa's competition. But Televisa's like, no, we need you back here. So she signs a multi-million-dollar contract with Televisa, goes back to Mexico and starts having to give explanations as to who this kid is, who's always following her around. Then in 2017, a phone call is leaked where wife of the president was talking about the affair. She essentially confirmed all the rumors that yes, Adela and the president did have an affair. She did go assault her and they had a kid. And then Adela Noriega just disappeared. She came back to Televisa, did a couple of soap operas, and then she was like, I'm done, I'm good. Part of what Televisa did with the catálogo is that they would host parties. And in these parties, all of this shady stuff went down. Sexual favors in exchange for big roles and political favors for the network, where, apparently Televisa was in bed with the Mexican government. And in order for them to do things for the network, they loaned out their actors, male and female. What shocked me was that Sebastián Rulli was on this list. Oh, another interesting thing I found out was that Luis Miguel was so obsessed with Adela Noriega. He wanted her to be in his music video so badly that they paid her $80,000 back in 1984 to be in his music video, Palabra de Honor, which in today's money is $250,000 to be in a music video. And you're a teenager. She was like 14 at the time. That's crazy. Now, there are so many actresses that married politicians, Anaí being one of them. I don't know how true it is. I don't know if the catálogo exists, but a lot of actors have come out and said that, yeah, it definitely exists. Another thing that the catalog would do, you could hire out a celebrity to go to an event with you with press or an event without press. So basically you just got to have dinner with them. And what they would tell the celebrity was if they want to go further with you, if they want to spend the night with you, you charge them and they would keep a cut. Terrible. Allegedly, right? Allegedly, because I don't think Televisa would ever want this to be confirmed. This is one of the biggest secrets that Televisa has kept for decades. I'm more inclined to believe that it does happen because it happens in Hollywood and we know of it. We've seen it so many times. Why wouldn't it happen in Mexico? And probably the most disturbing allegation about this catalog is that they did it with children too. Lucero was one of them, and apparently her rate for the night was $1.8 million because she was a virgin. Oh my God, that is so disturbing, but it happens in Hollywood and it happened to child actors in the 1950s, and well, who knows if it happens now? I don't know, but damn, like that is my eyeshadow not blended in? But now with all of these streaming platforms, telenovelas are huge. They're at the palm of your hand, you know? You don't have to wait for that one episode to come once a week anymore. The 2020s gave us more complex and diverse themes, and this was what gave way to the narco novela. If you've noticed a colorism trend, you're not wrong. Whenever you saw a lead, they were always more European looking, and when you saw a maid or a worker or someone that was delivering something or just appeared on screen for a little bit because they were somebody that, you know, a chauffeur or something, they were always more indigenous or brown. Having white skin represented wealth. It meant that you didn't have to work. So this is the look that all of these soap operas were going for. It was more aspirational, you could call it. But yes, colorism definitely existed and still exists, although now you are more likely to see somebody that's more indigenous looking or darker skin. If you have your favorite telenovelas, drop them in the comments, and if you have your favorite soap operas, you could be from anywhere and still watch them. Let me know what they are. I think it's interesting to have a little conversation about novelas. My favorites as a kid growing up were Agujeta Color de Rosa, Muchachitas, Mi Pequeña Traviesa, Clase 406. La Usurpadora was one of those that I watched, but I don't remember it too well. A Mil por Hora. I watched Amor a Mil por Hora and Clase 406 last year on VIX. It's so good. And I've watched Ruby at least once a year, every year since I was in my early 20s, which is a bit much, but I love it so much. I also love Teresa, Lo que la vida me robó. I love anything with Angelique Boyer and Sebastián Rulli. Let me know in the comments which are yours. And that's it for this episode.